Hi everyone, how are you? My name is Keith Carroll. I am a director at Engage People Recruitment, and you're all very welcome to Notions and Promotions. This is our podcast where we dive into the notions and big ideas shaping today's workforce and the people turning these notions into real impact. As I said, my name is Keith. It's lovely to have you all with me today. I have an amazing guest coming up, but before we talk about her, I'd like to tell you all a little bit about me. So I work here at Engage People Recruitment, recruiting in the financial services sector, mainly international financial services, I have to say, and that aligns nicely with my background. So I'm recruiting with the guys here at Engage People. God, it'll be 4 years this November. That time has flown by. So I'm recruiting coming up on 4 years. Before that, I spent 15 years in corporate banking. The majority of that time at Deutsche Bank. I played a number of roles across the Deutsche Bank operation in Ireland, ultimately becoming the COO of corporate bank operations across Europe. And then 2021, I decided I wanted to do something completely different with my career in the middle of a pandemic, no less. And I moved out of banking and into recruiting here at Engage People. So back to the guest. We have an amazing lady joining us today. Her name is Lucia O'Riordan. God, what hasn't she done? She started her life in retail banking, worked her way up, managing big, chunky footprints across the retail banking sector in Ireland, moving then into Fairstone or AskPaul. You may know of that brand. Paul has been inside, I think, of every bus in Dublin at some stage in his career. So I really am excited to hear what Lucia has to say. As you'll notice as you listen to these podcasts, and hopefully you stay to listen to these podcasts, but as you notice, the theme or the topics that we cover will have a HR lens. So ideally the guests that are coming up, and you'll see we've really exciting people coming up outside of Lucia, the guests will have a HR flavour. Some of them may be senior business leaders across the financial services industry here in Ireland, but we want to talk about topics that are interesting from a HR perspective. And Lucia will no doubt have some very, very interesting and exciting insights to share. So without further ado, I will let Lucia into the room and we'll take it away. I'm delighted to welcome Lucia O'Riordan, HR Director from Fairstone / AskPaul.
Thank you, Keith.
You're very welcome. And we're going to have a good chat about all of those topics, Lucia. So I might start actually before we get into that. Do you remember the first phone call we had when I asked you to be on this podcast?
I do. I was actually sitting in a car park. And I think, if I'm right, you'd sent me a mail that day to say, want to talk to you, like kind of, don't worry. I'm saying, my God.
It's not about a job. It's not about anything to do with recruitment.
You know, what has he got on his mind now? And I think the day you asked me, I was kind of, oh, right. Don't want to say no, but damn, do I really want to do this? But yeah, just sat back and said, yeah, of course I'll do it.
And I was delighted. And as part of that call, Lucy, you might recall, I said you were the first person I thought of when we were talking about this podcast about Engage People. You did,
actually, yeah.
And genuinely, that was by design. We were looking back. So what we decided to do, or what we wanted to do with Caroline, our marketing lady, and with Paul, who heads up Engage People, we wanted to pull together a podcast, but not another stuffy business podcast. And whilst the topics are quite professional, there's a lot of interesting things that we want to take from them. We wanted people to come onto the podcast, and whilst there's a HR lens, people who had something to say. And I think when we looked back, particularly when I looked back over your career and the different areas of leadership that you were involved in, not necessarily in the HR space, I thought you would give a more well-rounded view to the podcast, which is why you were our first guest. I'm delighted you eventually accepted and said yes.
Well, I'm delighted, and I suppose I've been working with Engage People in Fairstone and AskPaul before that for a number of years. So yeah, I'm delighted that you thought of me for today.
Brilliant. So you mentioned Fairstone, AskPaul. Let's go back. Talk us through your career to date, Lucia. Start right at the beginning, education, and then work your way through it.
Okay. Well, predominantly a banking background. I've always been in the financial services sector, predominantly banking. Did a small stint in, I suppose, my earliest role in a broker's in Dunleary. Moved from there to Bank of Ireland and did a number of years in Bank of Ireland, moving into the financial advisory space, and Lifetime as it was back then. From there, I moved to AIB again, the life and pensions end of the business. It's an area that I'm passionate about and always have been, financial planning for individuals. I suppose been with AIB for just over 20 years. I would have left there 5 years ago. And I suppose I had a number of careers all under the one umbrella of AIB, from life and pensions and the advisory side, into private banking, into retail banking and leadership within AIB. My final role in AIB was leading the branches, the network of branches and business centres in this particular area, in actual fact, in Dublin South Central, so Dublin 2, 4 and 6. I suppose the point that I decided to leave AIB was maybe quite obviously a big decision for me after 20 odd years. But it was a point in my career that if I didn't leave then, I was possibly never going to leave. Yeah. So took the decision. One of the points you made earlier there, just in talk you through my career, was the point about education. And I suppose that was always a niggling factor for me, that I'd got to leave in cert. I hadn't gone directly to college. My kind of studies beyond secondary school were done through the bank with banking exams. But I always wanted to do a little bit more to develop myself. So I was lucky enough that when I made the decision to leave AIB, I also made the decision to commence a master's programme. I did that in an environment which I had done a lot of work in over the years, which was the IMI and through UCC. And I suppose, again, coming from leadership roles within the bank, that whole area and topic of leadership and good leadership was one of the core areas of study within the Masters. So I took a little bit of time out. COVID hit not too long after deciding that to leave AIB. So some of my studies were done during COVID. But that was a blessing in its own way, because it kind of gave me the freedom of not having a full-time role and being able to immerse myself in the master's programme. And then a conversation with AskPaul came about through one of your own former colleagues. And I went in to do some work with Paul, not thinking that I was going to be there that long. And hey, presto, 4 years later, I'm still there with a business that has really transformed in terms of our own relationship and being acquired by Fairstone in the UK, and what we're doing in terms of building out the Fairstone presence in the Irish market.
Amazing. I want to go back to your retail banking days. Is it fair to say, were you in a sales type capacity when you started in banking? Were you selling life and pensions? Or
I was,
yeah,
that was it. That was it initially. And I suppose that was an area I really enjoyed. As I said, working with people, helping them to put financial plans into place. But it would be possibly fair to say I had a couple of strong role models in the bank. Some, predominantly female, to be honest with you. Some who maybe I never took the time to tell them that I was inspired by them. But I took a lot of learnings from them, and when I saw how they had progressed their career, and I suppose back then, Keith, going back all those years ago, you either came up traditionally through the ranks within the bank, but you certainly didn't move from kind of one area, which was the life and pensions, directly into bank, or it was quite difficult. Whereas I suppose I broke a few glass ceilings in terms of coming straight in leadership roles. So coming in, kind of having not meandered my way up through the various grades and roles within the bank. So that was kind of, I can nearly actually pinpoint it to that moment when that real ambition kicked in, and I said to myself this particular day, do you know, there's actually nothing you can't do if you put your mind to it. And I think that's a philosophy that I've taken with me the whole way through my career.
And that's super interesting for me, Lucia, because if you look at the journey you've taken, right, to managing a set of branches in the most affluent part of the country, you were the head of those branches essentially. What was the trigger point to get you from your entry level in the bank to that place?
Okay, go back to what I said there about that kind of turning point. In my own mindset, maybe that there's nothing that you can't achieve. Perhaps unwittingly, I set out about, kind of surrounding myself with the people that could help me. There's one thing I found in my career, that particularly when you're at early stage in your career, and it's something I've been passionate about doing with others, is that when you're early stage, if you ask for help, you're working hard, you're trying to demonstrate your ability, you're trying to grow professionally. And I've never had a scenario when I've turned to somebody to ask them to help me in developing myself that there were any blockers. So getting the right people on side, and I suppose this kind of links loosely. I was always passionate about the whole area of leadership. I saw the gaps in my own education as to where I wanted it to be, but it was a subject that I was always well versed in and read a lot about. So even back to those early days of building my own brand, what did I want to be known for? I wanted to be known for someone that would absolutely give everything they were asked to do 110%, would go above and beyond, set kind of high expectations for myself and perhaps the pressure I put myself under. And I suppose another subject to touch upon, Keith, is predominantly it was a male-orientated environment.
And it still is to a certain extent in retail banking.
Yeah. And particularly the higher you climb. And I suppose putting that in context, in that last senior role I had in the bank, that if you look at the top 1% of leaders, only 25% of those were female. And I suppose that's a different topic in its own right. But I suppose having that it's having that ability to believe in yourself, to trust your ability, to know you can learn, but equally be comfortable and feeling vulnerable, and every so often having that wobble to say, Jesus, I'm out of my depth here, I can't do this. But it's how you bring yourself back on track. And for me, that's a little bit of what comes from within. But equally, it comes from the relationships with the people that you trust, that you can be absolutely vulnerable with. And, you can bare your soul and say, I'm struggling here. Can you help me? And sometimes some of those conversations just bring you back on track.
Is there a point in your career, Lucia, where there was a trigger and you were like, oh my God, I'm a leader now? And upon that realisation, did things change for you in terms of your mindset, attitude, approach to work?
From a leadership perspective, you could say that there's, there were a couple of moments and a couple of times that I took, as I progressed my career, took a lot of learning from. So you get those initial promotions, call whatever, you're leading a team, you have the young exuberance of I can do it all, and sometimes you're not as mindful in your thinking of how you'll grow the team and how you'll lead the team. Because generally what you find, and in big organisations, and I suppose the learning from that I took into Fairstone and AskPaul, is sometimes people are promoted, you've got that tap on the shoulder, you've got that stripe, you're left on to get on with it. But sometimes perhaps without the level of support and development that you need to come to terms with yourself as a leader. So I suppose being absolutely honest with you, in all the teams I've led over the years, I've done really well and I've made those mistakes. I've lost teams. by, as I said, being maybe not as mindful, being hard, being too demanding, and maturity and how you develop yourself, and the advice that you can take and the feedback that you can take from others help you to actually hone those skills. I'm a great believer in being very reflective, in lots of different areas, and particularly when it comes to, your performance in a role, or even today how we do things, that we're constantly challenging ourselves. Are we doing it to the best of our ability? Is there any way that we can do things differently? How can we be better the next time round? So yes, those kind of light bulb moments, as I said, when I know maybe I haven't been the best leader, when I know I've done really well through teams where I've worked with diverse teams where you've struggled to bring them together. And I suppose it's going back to a lot of core principles of engagement, of honesty, of building trust, taking everybody on their own merits and at face value, and building out an environment where people are comfortable to show their vulnerability, to be honest, and to seek help.
You mentioned a second ago there actually about getting advice from people, and it's a cliche question, I should say, but I'll ask it anyway. If you were to go back to your younger self during those times you'd stepped up into a brand new leadership role, new for you in terms of managing, leading, what advice would you give your younger self?
I think having those key people around you to help guide and shape you is invaluable. Sometimes we step into a role and we put ourselves under that degree of pressure that we have to know it all, whereas in actual fact we don't. You listen to some of the great leaders, and I'm a big believer in this, and in fairness to Paul Merriman, I've heard him say it on multiple occasions. It's about the people you surround yourself with. We can't all have every skill and be expert in every aspect of our field. It's about getting the people around you, because it is the sum total. Leading a team, it's the sum total of all the parts within the team that actually bring the success of that team. And it's having people totally engaged with, a clear direction, a vision for what success and greatness looks like, and I suppose everybody moving in the same direction. So again, not feeling, for my younger self, not feeling that I'd a point to prove all on my own, because I didn't. And sometimes the greatest mistake we make is not asking for that help. And I suppose we'll go on and speak about it maybe a little bit later, but there's some of the lessons that I took into Fairstone with me, and I suppose the focus that we have on supporting and developing our junior and middle management to actually understand themselves and what type of leaders they can be versus what type of a leader they'd want to be, and then the broader impact of bringing that to life in terms of how they lead their teams. Not a huge amount of companies do that, actually, to be honest with you. That's a big plus point for AskPaul. You mentioned Paul Merriman there, character on the side of every bus in Dublin at one stage. What was it that landed with you specifically that thought, taking a role at AskPaul, where it's multifaceted, you wear a number of hats in there. What was it that made you think this could be a good career move for me? I think initially when I met Paul, it was his passion for the business, his passion about bringing, access to financial advice irrespective of your demographic. The client, the person that's getting advice is absolutely at the heart of everything he does. His enthusiasm to build the business, and long before Fairstone came along, he had the ambition to build the business to be the best possible version of financial advisory service available in Ireland. So that was his underlying passion for the business. He's a visionary leader. He knows where he wants to go to. He challenges. It's very fast-paced working with Paul. But, there's no stumbling blocks in making decisions for, the right decisions that are right to take the business on, to build out your function within the business. So there's that degree of empowerment, coupled with, as I said, his, I'd say his unwavering energy that he brings to bear every day in terms of, doing right by our clients, our brand, taking on board what's right for our teams within the business, creating the right environment for them to flourish. And as I said, he's a visionary leader that has really taken AskPaul and Fairstone to the level they're at now. And, I have absolutely no doubt in my mind the sky's the limit.
Yeah, brilliant.
Moving forward.
I mentioned there you wear multiple hats at AskPaul, and you do several, but one of which is in the HR space. I think HR Director is the title.
That's correct.
But I think I mentioned this earlier, you wouldn't be your traditional HR manager if you look back on your background, your experience, even from an education perspective. How did the HR title land on your desk?
Okay, well, I suppose, if I take it back to the leadership roles within the bank, that's all about people, and really what is HR? It's kind of marrying the technical piece and the, all of the policies, procedures, everything, but everything, that's kind of the technical piece, but everything hinges around people. As a leader, as I said, and I've given you kind of some examples there earlier, some of my strongest and most rewarding results, or I suppose experience in leadership, has been when I've created opportunities for people to shine, when I've coached and developed people, when I've given people the wherefore to grow within a team, and we've built businesses from, or branches within AIB, built success within branches. And I suppose some of that, as I said, it all hinges around people. The policies, the procedures we can learn, and I suppose the studies that I've undertaken on the leadership piece within AskPaul and Fairstone, we have, I think we're about 180 in headcount at the moment. Wow. I think I was number 24. So I came in on the operational side in terms of the support piece and how we built out that function within the business, because at that point we had ambitions to scale and we were going to grow the business. So I suppose I was the one with experience in the interview process, in bringing people on, in training and developing people. That kind of came from my background within AIB. As the business broadened out, that function sat with me. And I suppose with Fairstone coming along and how the business evolved and the new leadership team that Paul brought in, the HR role sat with me in addition to a role where we acquire businesses, and I have a team then and we work to integrate the business operationally and culturally into the Fairstone model. So I suppose outside of the legislation, the regulation, the policies, procedures, all of that can be learned. But the whole way throughout my career has always been people focused. So it's possibly still the natural spot for me. And, I won't underestimate that it's constant learning. Every day is a learning for me in terms of making sure that you are adhering to the process, the procedure, the good governance within HR. And again, I'm lucky enough to have some good people I can use as sounding blocks to help me and to support the business.
Very good. I want to unpeel that onion slightly, Lucia, and it's probably worth pointing out at this stage, whilst you're working for Fairstone and AskPaul, you're here in a personal capacity. So if there's anyone listening to this podcast from AskPaul and they're like, oh, Lucia said this on a podcast. No, she didn't. Okay, she's here in her personal capacity to have a chat about her own experience. But I do want to touch on some of the HR topics a little bit, given this is a predominantly HR focused podcast. You mentioned people a good bit there in your overview around the HR, and I totally get the link. And when we think about the people, we think about talent management, and I'd love to understand from your own perspective, Lucia, what do you think, and maybe there's no right or wrong answer to this, but what do you think the right approach is in hiring talent?
And I thought about this in, I suppose, the current fast-paced environment that I'm in, where speed is of the essence. We're scaling, we need talent, we need a constant stream of talent. So that is a priority for us. But equally, I've sat back and reflected, where have we really made the right decisions? And to be honest with you, it's trying to balance that speed of getting people into the business when you have a role or multiple roles which you need to fill. But, at the heart of it, Keith, is getting the right person. Yeah. And, equally without, I suppose, going on a PR campaign for engaged people. But the fact of the matter is, we've a good working relationship with you guys. My experience in working with Paul originally, working with Michael, working with yourself, Rob, Sinead, I suppose that relationship, you guys know what I want. When we have a key role, you listen to me. In actual fact, you've challenged my thinking on roles and the type of people. And sometimes maybe when, I might look at a particular candidate and feel maybe this isn't the right fit for us. Again, challenging my thought process. So that has been really positive in helping me and in helping us to bring the right candidates to bear. In terms of getting the right person, experience is great. And yes, certainly when you're looking at certain roles, they're, depending on where somebody is at in their career or how senior a role is, relevant experience. But, the technical piece and the skills can be learnt. So again, I think that takes me back to one of the aspects that we've done in Fairstone is to develop our people, so that therefore when we bring people on, we can surround them with coaching and development to help them flourish. Another thing for me don't go against your gut
I would agree
intuition
with that one. I would agree
as
with
well
that
as something is telling you. I have done it in the past, and I've hired saying, yeah, okay, that person is 80 or 90% there, she will be grand. And generally, you go with your gut.
I totally agree, Lucia, and I think two points to make on what you've just said. So one, Lucia was not paid for that big up for engaged people recruitment. We will gladly take it. Thank you so much. And the other piece on the gut, I absolutely agree. I think there's always a sense when I'm interviewing someone where you just get a feeling that maybe they're not going to be a right fit, but it's so hard to be objective when you're trying to take notes and trying to compare and contrast with the other interviewer in terms of whether you want to proceed or not. The gut feel sometimes can be hard to quantify. On that then, again, I want to talk a little bit more about the hiring piece and talent. As a recruiter, and I'm in the game 3.5 years, so I wouldn't say I'm a super experienced recruiter in any way, shape or form, but I've even noticed in the past 3 odd years that I've been doing this job that more and more candidates, when I'm speaking to them about a role, are interested in culture. And to me, I think the word culture can be done to death. It's a nice buzzword, but I don't think we look at it a lot. But actually and genuinely, particularly among graduates, people leaving university, at that kind of younger generation, it's in some cases more important than compensation or salary. What is your view on company culture? Do you think companies are actively trying to improve their culture? Is it just something that happens as a byproduct of good management? What are your thoughts on culture more generally in the workplace?
culture doesn't just come about by design. It is something that you have to constantly work on, and you have to constantly challenge yourself about the environment that you're creating. Culture, it's not what it says on your website.
Yep.
You know, it's what's said amongst people, you could say, generally when there's no leadership in the room, or when people and peers are discussing the environment that they're working in. I think the mistakes that can be made over that I've seen in the past is that we overvalue perks that we think give gym membership, have the occasional, free lunch. Yeah, sure, that's a great culture. But it goes far deeper than that. And I suppose what I'm experiencing in the candidates that are coming in, very different to me, as I said, having spent over 20 years in AIB, people have career aspirations, and it's what I can get from a business that's going to develop me professionally and personally and help me progress my career. So they're interludes with people that come to work with you, because they're not going to stay with you forever, So I think to keep yourself relevant, it's the investment that you make in delivering those career and development opportunities for those people, that you have that fleeting, that you play a part in their career for that period of time, whether that be, 12, 24, 36 months, because in essence, I suppose what we're seeing in the market at the moment, a lifespan generally in any particular role or in any particular company has a finite time frame around it, because people move on. It is listening to people, it's engagement, it's don't underestimate the appetite that people have to be engaged, to hear their views taken on board, to help shape the strategy within a business, to help shape the direction of a business or the function that the individual is working in, or part of the team that they're working within. A couple of initiatives that we've taken inside in Fairstone is that we've pulsed surveys. So again, listening, and it's all very fine. And in some organisations, and what I've seen in my career, sometimes there's the optics of taking these surveys and running these surveys and supposedly listening, but not seeing any change or any action come out of it. So we're constantly challenging ourselves in terms of how we're doing. What are our people telling us? What can we do better? And even, as I said to you, the employee of today wanting that progression, and sometimes, it's a balancing act, trying to balance individual ambition with where a business is right at this point in time, and having the opening for someone to move to a new role or a new experience. So we've set about creating hybrid roles. So you might have a desire to go one direction, but your core role is within, I don't know, say your core role is within the marketing team, but you might want to go the advisory route, or you might want to go the HR route. So it's been able to create a hybrid where somebody can work perhaps 3 days in their core role, or 4 days, and get the experience of working in another function, to see if that's right for them and to help them develop within it. Again, within culture, we speak about engagement, and it's constant dialogue, communicate, listen, provide feedback, and challenge, but never get complacent, because I think it's when we get complacent that stagnation sets in within a business.
I would agree, and actually I would also tie culture very firmly to company performance, actually. And if I look at, we're filming right now, we're recording this in April 2025, there's tariffs all over the news, Intel are in the news about potentially letting people go. And in a previous life before recruitment, I worked for a company where there was a round of mass redundancies, and I think that really, really impacted morale, culture, motivation. in your extensive career, Lucia, across various different financial services firms, have you been in a situation where you've had to motivate, maybe potentially significantly demotivated people? What are your tips on that?
Yeah, and I suppose going back in my career, I was leading teams at the time of when the whole world fell apart, financial crisis, and that was possibly one of the most difficult times in my career. You're leading teams, in an area within the bank back then, which was removed really from the decision-making echelons of head office, and you were leading people that had to get out and face the public every day of the week, when the banks, had to deal with those scenarios, and that's very difficult. And, again, it goes back to, whether it's a particularly difficult time, it's a fast-paced scaling time, the relationship that you have with your people, the trust and honesty that you have, and, how do you demonstrate that you care for your people and that you're there to support them, that putting the arm round the shoulder, that things may be bad today, but we'll move on, and to keep them focused. And I think sometimes it is dealing with the here and now and what you're going through on a day-to-day basis, but equally keeping people focused in those really tough times, that down the line, today might be a bad day, but the future is brighter, and I suppose if you take that adage and you take it in positive environments, when you're trying to develop people and you're trying to keep them focused, keep them motivated, you want to grow the business, it's helping them shape their ambitions and paint that picture of what they can achieve. And not everything happens today, so it's keeping them focused on what their bigger goals are and ambitions are, and trying to balance that realism about how quickly we can get there as well.
Yeah. Excellent, very good. I have one more question on culture that I'd love to ask your thoughts on it, and it's based on, I guess, my own experience. So I graduated from college in 2006, and at the time, the retail banking sector would have been seen as very pale, stale, male. And for me, as a gay man graduating back then, I would have felt uneasy potentially to go into that sector, as in, would I fit in? Would I be able to grow my career, progress throughout my career? Now, I went to a German bank, which I also had the similar reservations about. But the reason why I mentioned it is, one, you were in that sector at the time, but two, I work with some of the leading retail banks now as a recruiter, and I couldn't be more wrong. They are some of the most cutting edge, slick companies you could work for. And my question is, do you think there's been progression from 2006 to now from a cultural perspective in the retail banking sector? Or do you think maybe the perception back then was wrong and actually they've always been somewhat progressive?
If I go back then, yeah, absolutely. I hear what you're saying, Keith, in terms of the perception. And I suppose, there was always a willingness to grow out. And in fairness, I will say, to AIB, there was always that focus around diversity. And, how do we build diversity and inclusiveness within an organisation that is seemed, that might have the perception of being stale, if you like. So again, and that you can take that in any large organisation where there might be that ambition, at the top. And sometimes it can be tick boxing, or box ticking, should I say, that we want to be seen as being progressive. But in actual fact, that comes down to, to the leaders within the organisation to bring that to life in the areas that they have the biggest influence and the biggest impact. And, that diversity of opinion, that diversity of thinking, the diversity of culture, that is just so healthy within an organisation, and the ability to listen. So there has to be the right mindset in terms of building that out, listening to people and not being afraid to being challenged and to challenge thinking. Again, we've moved on, where you talk about '06, we're 19 years down the line from there. But again, talking about the whole area of talent management and hiring, I think we have to be very in tune with our own biases. One thing I like to do is, and we have a process, and I can talk you through our process for hiring, which, kind of starts off with that introductory, I like to call it that chemistry call. Are we going to be a good fit for each other? Do I think this individual culturally can be a good fit for the culture that we have? And then you go on to interview process, and it's bringing a diversity of thought into that panel when you're interviewing somebody. So to be cognizant of any particular unconscious bias that you may have or may be present within your thought process, but equally bringing that diversity of thought that you can challenge each other in the viewpoint to do the best for the candidate or candidates that are sitting in front of you that you're meeting when you're going through that process, but equally to give the person that's appointed the best opportunity of succeeding within the business while making sure you're getting that right fit.
Very good. I have some really exciting, very exciting, quick fire questions I want to go through, but I have one more question I want to ask you. I'm going to keep it vague because I'd love to hear your thoughts more generally on it.
Okay.
When we talk about the future of work, right, and there's so many different facets to this, be it technology is coming to take my job, AI is coming. Your kids are out, they don't live in Ireland anymore, right? They've emigrated to get...
I've one still at home, one in Dubai, one in Oz.
In Australia. There's lots of Irish off to Canada, to Australia. Some are potentially returning. What are your thoughts on the future of work from an Irish economic perspective?
I go back to when I suppose when I was starting off in the workforce and we were coming out of recession, and lots of my peers would have emigrated for economic reasons, for job reasons, for not being able to secure the employment that they wanted here, because it was a very tough market. When we're talking about the challenges on young adults emigrating at the moment, that is a massive challenge to to the economy here and to potentially businesses growing. But equally, I think you've got to knock that on its head. The experience, these are lifestyle decisions to emigrate, to go abroad to work. A lot will come back, and a lot will come back having experienced different cultures, having experienced different organisations, and we have to look at the positive that will bring to bear here in terms of roles into the future that we will fill with that diversity of experience, with our the likes of my daughters coming back and everybody else's kids. One of the things currently I do when somebody that works with us decides they're going to go off, we try to keep the door open for them. Okay, in some cases, those returning after a year travelling Asia may not opt to come back to us, but we do engage. We have a couple going off at the moment, insofar as one of the young guys on my team is going, but very much I'm keeping the door open for him. Another thing I would generally do is being that point of contact for them, whether it's returning to the organisation or not, but as a sounding block from an advice perspective. Keep in touch with me. Let's keep the lines of communication open. Anything I can help you to do down the line, I will do for you. So that's one aspect to it. In terms of the future of work, we spoke about this isn't just roles and activities and we've got to fill them. people want meaningful careers in organisations that they feel wrap themselves around that employee experience, from the environment they're working in to the growth potential within that organisation. So I think we have to be very mindful of that overall employee experience. It used to be, we used to talk about the value proposition. It's gone beyond that now, and it kind of marries into nearly lifestyle as well as everything else. And we have that balance that we have to get. And then an area that frightens me and excites me is the whole area of AI. Would I say I'm well versed in it? Possibly not. Do I use it? Yes. We use it in terms of, the simple thing around the wording of, a role that we might want to market, and how we make it attractive, to the person that's going to read it, to the recipient. How are we engaging to get people to come and to consider Fairstone and to reach out to us, and to get away from that kind of stuffy language, to create engaging communication that brings people with us. So I think, as I said, that's a broad question. Yes, we have the knowledge drain, moving away, but we've got to look that and know that in its own right will bring experience back to us. Personally, on a personal level, one of the things I've always been conscious of, I suppose, and one of the kind of the thought process that I've always had in the roles, I'm only ever keeping a seat warm for a period of time. So it's up to me to pass the baton, and it's that knowledge transfer to whoever is coming behind me to set them up to be bigger and better than I've ever been in any role that I have. So I hope I've possibly gone round the houses, but I hope I've given you a sense of
and it's been
my thoughts.
It's funny when I think about the emigration piece in particular. I know at Engage People we've lost some really strong recruiters, like really, really good recruiters to emigration. And it's not the fact, like if you go back to the 80s, 90s when people just couldn't get a job. There's jobs everywhere here. Yeah. They just wanted a different / better lifestyle, and maybe they were younger and wanted to just experience not life in Ireland, and it's very difficult to buy a house, and we could do a podcast on that topic by itself. So it is an interesting time where the emigration this time of Irish people abroad is not in the same vein as what was happening in the 80s. It's a different type of mindset. The AI piece as well, it looked very interesting. I can't really talk about it because I don't know a huge amount about it. There's a lot happening in recruitment in the AI space. I think a lot of agencies are taking the time right now just to explore what is within the realms of possibility. I would say some agencies, including ourselves, would use it, would dabble in AI, but I think there's a lot more functionality out there that just needs to be explored. So it's more to come in that space. Yeah. A few quick fire, if I may.
All right.
So we'll start with
You're going to set me up.
I'm going to set you up now. We'll start with the work-related ones, right? Work from home or in the office?
I think it's a combination of both, and I think it's we might think that people want to be at home full time, but the isolation factor can, and from experience with exit interviews I've done with people, that's the feedback I've got, albeit that you think people are happy to be at home. So find a reason to get people into the office, and from a development perspective, particularly early stage, new roles, it's invaluable what you can learn by osmosis by being in the right environment.
I would agree. When you're hiring, you're looking for experience or potential?
Again, and I'm not sitting on the fence here saying a combination of both, but ideally, depending on the role, certain roles you need a lot of relevant experience, but never underestimate the passion of the person that you're bringing in, and the ability people have to actually immerse themselves and develop themselves in the right environment and with the right support.
Very good. Training, classroom or on the job?
Again, Janie, did you design these questions so I would sit on the fence? There's merits in both. Informal, empower people to say what works with them. Create the environment where you can deliver both, but understand somebody's preferred method in learning.
Very good. AI, which we've just mentioned, game changer or overhyped?
I'm going to say game changer, because potentially, as I said, I'm just not where I would like to be in my understanding of the realms and the future capability. But I think the hype piece was, we're never going to eliminate the human intervention, because the humans will make the decisions.
Brilliant. Now on to the non-work related ones.
Go on.
Books, traditional or audiobook?
Oh, traditional.
Sweet or savoury?
Savoury.
Oh, she has an opinion when it's not work related. That's very interesting.
Yeah, God, I'm not sitting on the fence here, am I?
Early bird or night owl?
Oh, early bird.
On an airplane, window or aisle?
Window.
North side or south side? Be careful now.
Originally south side, I would say, although marginally, as I'll be reminded from my past, originally from Ballyfermot, living out in...
My partner's from Ballyfermot, actually.
Oh, really? Yeah, living out in Ritouth in County Meath.
Very good. Lucia, your first podcast, I believe?
My first podcast,
I
Carroll.
really enjoyed it. I have to say, it's also my first. I'm delighted that you did it. Thank you so much again for your time, Lucia. See you again.
Thanks, Keith.
Well, there you have it. Lucia O'Riordan, what a powerhouse of a lady. Some of that conversation, or most of that conversation, really resonated with me when she talked in particular around, trusting your gut. Some of the challenges she faced as well as she moved up in her career. Definitely a lot of food for thought for me as a leader, but also for some of you guys as you listened in. So thanks for your company. I hope you enjoyed it. Stay tuned. Please like and subscribe and do all of those other things that those influencers say. And I'll see you on the next episode.